SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Casey Trujillo. And most importantly, we have a wonderful guest, Kat Kennedy, who is a general partner at Kickstart Fund. She is passionate about building products, companies, and the startup ecosystem in the Mountain West. Before joining Kickstart as a general partner, she was president and CXO of Degreed. Today, her 15 years of operating experience gives her a unique perspective as an investor, one that allows her to not only spot talented entrepreneurs from all backgrounds, but also to serve as a mentor, fostering innovation through every stage of the company's growth. Kat, welcome to SaaS Therapy.
Thanks. It's so good to be here today.
Kat, tell us, what did we miss about your bio? I'm sure there's other little hidden secrets that are there about Kat that we maybe didn't cover.
Oh yeah, bios are always fun because one, it feels very awkward. It's like you're being introduced, and it's
Right?
like the shiniest version of of who you are and want to be seen. You know, I was president and CXO at Degreed. And anytime that bullet is mentioned, I was there for a decade from, first employee up. And I just have memories of like all the painful parts as it's like, and this is the great company. And my mind just going through all of the trauma. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. We hope to hear some of those fun stories throughout this conversation today. But, Todd does the nice formal introduction. We like to play a game called This or That.
Okay.
Right at the beginning. It's just 5 quick questions that get us to know a little bit more about you, Kat. So first question, would you rather have talking pets or talking babies?
Talking babies. I think pets would be judgy. Like I see the judgment in my dog's eyes. I don't want to hear her say what she's thinking. Yeah. For babies, it'd be cute little observations, and my dog she is the judgiest little thing. She's a schnauzer. So those thoughts are fine. Never said.
Oh, well put. Okay. You are out at a beautiful lake up in the mountains. Everybody's about ready to jump in. Do you dip the toe in, or are you jumping off and going fully immersed?
I don't even dip my toe. That's cold. Yeah. I just judge people like, no. I'm a comfort first. I was never the child that was doing something adventurous. I'm like, there could be something in that water. There could be a rock that you could hit. I'm not going to do that. I'm not. It's very funny because I now do risk as my career, but if it's bodily risk or bodily discomfort, no, I'm not about it.
Well, for our audience, some of us are in Utah, and there's a place in Utah called Bear Lake. And it doesn't have any bears, but it is some of the coldest water. My wife has taken me up there for a family thing every year for, I think it's now been, I want to say probably 25 or 28 years I've gone up every summer. And I don't think I've ever gotten in the water because it's so cold. So I appreciate that, Kat. That makes sense to me.
Well, I grew up in Bear Lake. That's why.
That
makes water sense. No, I'll stay on the boat, please.
Yeah, exactly right. Ketchup or ranch?
Ranch. Hidden Valley Ranch, too. I'm old school. Yeah.
That's given. That's good. Ooh, crunchy peanut butter or smooth peanut butter?
Smooth.
Yeah, that tells a lot about a person right there. I feel like I know you really well now, Kat. The last one, and we'll end this, is air guitar or air drums?
Air
when
drums.
You're hearing that great song and you just want to jam out a little bit. Which one are you doing? You doing the
air guitar or the
air
drums for sure. Air guitar, I can't do that and take myself seriously. Where like drums are easy,
There it is. Good. Thanks for playing.
I always find it surprising when we do this game because I always feel like not only do I learn something from our guest about who they are, but I also always walk away with some weird little connection. Meaning, when you mention the fact that you don't like getting in water and that caused you to go into risk management, it made me then think, what are the things in my own personal life that influence what I chose to go into for my own career? And I think there's so much you can learn about how you react in personal situations and how that actually informs what you do in your business life.
Yeah, for sure.
Kat, we're so glad you're here. One of the things Casey and I were thinking a lot about before we had the chance to have you on, we were trying to think of what would we want to talk about with you today. And one of the big discussion points that we had was we were looking at a lot of the data around not just the SaaS world, right? I mean, we're running into a lot of the conversations we've had recently has been about how the SaaS world is the economic, the economy is changing, and that's causing all kinds of new trends and new evolutions of how teams are operating. But one of the data points that stuck out to us is just simply the fact that the average tech employee changes jobs 1 to every 3 years. And we even looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that's like almost half the national average for other industries. And one of the things we were really curious to get your take on was, why is that? Why is it that the SaaS world feels so much more turbulent than other parts of the economy?
I think because it's an emerging business model. I mean, cloud kind of started truly with Salesforce, and Salesforce isn't that old. It's a business model still in its infancy. And why we love it in venture is like, hey, there's opportunity there, but most startups fail. So I think we see a lot of transients because not everything's a rocket ship, and people are trying to find the rocket ship and ride it. And so as they're in the belly of the beast and they're not seeing the growth that they want to, there's new SaaS popping up all the time, and there's opportunity to hop. So I think just the nature of how young that business model is, plus how few actually make it to the exponential outcome. And so the employees that are looking for that exponential outcome, through their equity ownership, I think some change for that. I also think you're able to hop and get a higher role. Like, it's really, really hard to do internal mobility. And so I think given, I did a decade at Degreed, and so I saw a lot of research around internal mobility and skill development. And so I would say the youth of these organizations likely means they don't have HR and performance practices. So without an internal mobility ladder, individuals to get career progression are jumping. So I think it's, hey, you want to have an outcome and you're not seeing it, so you're going to jump, and that outcome might be personal. And if I don't see the outcome in my own career track, I'm going to jump too.
Kat, I know we're going to dive into this more. One of the reasons why we were so excited to have you on the podcast was to help people say, gosh, am I on a rocket ship, or am I on maybe something that's going to flame out pretty fast? What are the insights?
A dinghy on a cold lake that's going to be stuck and you're going to get really wet and cold. Yeah.
On Bear Lake.
Before we get there, though, you said a decade at Degreed. How did you even start there? How did you see that opportunity? What got you involved there? Mm-hmm. And then what were some of the things that you did to progress your career there and those opportunities? I think the audience would really find this interesting, your story.
Yeah, pure dumb luck is how I got at Degreed. So I did information systems as my degree, and that's a mix of computer science and business. So I was working as a software developer, a few agencies, but I was in a larger organization doing software development, and I did a lot of moonlighting work. So I had a profile up on this site called Dribble. I would take on 2 or 3 projects a quarter, just, spending cash. And I got introduced to David Blake, who is the founder of Degreed, because he needed someone to help do a little bit of software development, a little bit of design. And so I got introduced to him, and he painted this picture of what the world should look like when it comes to education. And I was like, cool. Yeah, sounds great. I agree. That should be true. And he offered me a job, and little naive me back in 2012 had no awareness of venture capital, venture-backed startups, that you could call yourself a business and not have revenue. And Degreed was very much aspiring venture-backed company with no revenue, but he called himself a business. But I believed very deeply in this future that he said we could create if we just went and chased it. And so I joined him having no idea what I was doing. I remember asking like, hey, when does payroll run? And the look on his face, I'll die remembering it. I'm like, payroll? Like, when this angel check clears, then I'll be able to pay you. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But I got to know really quickly the venture-backed model because I was just living inside of it. And so that's the first question. Just like, I said yes to an opportunity, to something I believed in, that I knew I could work very hard for. And then my trajectory career-wise really maps to that trajectory of Degreed. As Degreed grew, and there's always something to be done, both in startups, but I think any organization, like everything has problems, everything has opportunities for you to stretch yourself and to therefore grow, and both in skill and hopefully in the roles that you are being compensated for. And that's very much what I found at Degreed. As Degreed was growing fast, things were breaking. I was there. I had the opportunity to be the individual that both saw things that needed to be fixed and to lead the charge on doing so. And I was lucky to have people that were patient around me to help me seize those opportunities and to grow into them. So I started as a first employee and I left as president. And what that really is just a testament to how much Dave believed in the mission, that he gave me opportunities where I was able to stretch that much. And that the board also, as at each turn, as we raised more money and as we hit more milestones, they could have hired someone more experienced into those roles. I think the board getting to know me and giving me the opportunity to stretch into it, it's credit both to Dave and to his board that he compiled, that they gave me those chances.
Kat, I want to ask 2 follow-up questions. Mm-hmm. One, what's a story where you're like, Degreed's never going to make it? Is there a story you could point to where you're like, we're no way we're going to ever figure this out? And then is there a story where you're like, we have figured this out, this is going to work? I don't know if you could contrast maybe 2 examples for some people listening out there wondering if their company's ever going to make it. Maybe some insight you could give on a story that wasn't there and then a story that was there.
Yeah, you hear that startups are roller coasters, right? And from the outside in, I think we assume there's months of happy, there's months of real troughs of sadness. That roller coaster is day by day. You might wake up in the morning and be picturing the yacht that you're going to buy and how good that sun is going to feel on your face as you're in the Mediterranean on your yacht in the morning. And at night, you're like, oh, we're done. Like, how are we even going to make payroll? What's going to happen to us? Like, those are day by day things. I don't think I ever had a moment where I thought Degreed's not going to make it. There were a lot of times where we didn't have money, but I think we all believed so deeply in what we were building that even without money, even if we couldn't get paid, we were going to find a way to make this thing work. And there were a lot of those moments between 2012 and 2015 of just like, we don't have cash. Like, we got to figure out how to make this work still. And what are the goals we actually have to achieve to still survive? But I always believed it would work. I'm an optimist by nature, so maybe it was a little crazy, but I never had a moment where I thought this thing isn't going to work. I always believed it could change the world in our own little way. The moment where I was like, oh yeah, it is going to work. It was the week before Christmas, and Bank of America was our first flagship client, and we had no right selling to Bank of America, and they have heard me tell the story, so it's okay. We were a 12-person company selling into one of the best run organizations in the world, and the implementation would have been enterprise-wide. So we had spent a few days at their headquarters in Charlotte and talked to them about what they needed and how Degreed was going to solve for that pain. And then we got into procurement with Bank of America. And it was the day before Christmas Eve. So I was up with my family at Bear Lake, and I got the call from our COO. We just got the contract signed. Like, we get to countersign this contract right now. And the ACV was, I won't give exact numbers, but like 7-figure ACV, growing over time, like an amount of money I never dreamt that we would have in revenue. And I freaked out while on the phone, and I hung up the phone and I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to work. Because I saw the beauty of an enterprise sales motion. I saw the contract size. I saw that contract stepping up year over year. And that was just the first with so many other organizations. And if we could sell into Bank of America, like a very old school financial services org with like stringent security and procurement processes, I knew we could sell into anybody. And that was the moment I knew like, oh, this thing is going to work. But it was in, I think it was 2014. So it was almost 2015 when that call came in.
Kat, the thing that I hear there is the fact that, one, we started this with you are not a massive risk taker, or at least that's not really the right way. I initially interpreted I don't want to get wet and I'm going to avoid the risk of getting wet. But instead I'm hearing a totally different story, which is that you're an optimist who wants to work hard to mitigate risk rather than not take risk. And what's interesting to me is, Warren Buffett says that, it's not about how hard you rode the boat, it's about what boat you get in. And I know we have PTSD about using the boat analogy and the going into the wet lake. But like one of the things that's hard for me as I think about the journey of most people in the SaaS world is knowing when you should stay in the boat and when you should get out of the boat. And in the case of Degreed, you were on that roller coaster and you saw those ups and downs, but you never felt like now is time to get out of the boat. So how do you make that decision? What are criteria that you should look for to know and be able to evaluate, are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it?
I think as long as you still have a picture of what the world could be if you were successful and you still see possibilities of that coming to fruition, I think you stay in the boat. And there's so many ways. Like we didn't pay ourselves for a while. Our founder was racking up credit card debt to pay people who needed to eat to survive. He was selling everything that he could, right? Like it was not, oh, well, the cash is at zero, so we're done, because we still believed that there was something to be accomplished and that we could do it, that we were close, right? So it was this mix of optimism, pragmatism, and like, hey, we got to be in the trenches to make it happen. As long as you still have that vision and you really believe it, I think I would say stay at it. And there's a lot of creative ways that we can say stay at it. Where I think we can get, though, too many times is it's not about the vision. It's not about what you're trying to create. It's about being an entrepreneur and succeeding as an entrepreneur. And so, I find myself in a lot of conversations as now a venture capitalist with people. It's pre-seed. So like it's touch and go all the time. Yeah. Same with seed. Right. And so, trying to help founders sort through their own psychology and what they believe, because what I wouldn't want is a very capable founder chasing a company that he or she, it'll never turn into anything. That's just opportunity cost, right? Like it's just not worth it. And so what I'm trying to diagnose with them is like, do they really believe it? Do they believe in what they're building? Do they believe in what they're chasing and that they can still unlock it? As long as there's that hope there, I think it's still worth it. Because overnight successes don't exist, especially when you're in it. It always feels futile. It's a grind 99.9% of the time. Those people who just like, it goes quickly. Like even when that happens, it still feels like a grind. You don't see the trend of up and to the right until you're looking in hindsight, because it's like this, and maybe it's just slowly over time getting better. And so how do you know? I think if you have given up hope, it's time to call it.
That's so good, Kat. Let's say I'm on a low. Let's say I'm in that thought process of how is this actually going to work? As you're trying to rally your team or just yourself, what are some things that maybe I should think about? I heard you say, hey, do I still believe this could happen? Just test myself on, do I have that belief? Sounded like that's one of your best practices. What are some other best practices that I should be thinking about if I'm in that low how do I get myself out of it? What are some things I should be asking myself to kind of separate the emotion of the situation and get back to maybe the facts?
Go sleep. I mean it. I mean it.
That's Casey's problem.
Because
He only sleeps like 2 hours a night. So
yeah, it's so amazing. Like my dad has this saying, like, sun will still rise in the east. And at first, growing up, I thought like, yeah, of course it will, Dad. But like what he was saying is like, go to bed. It's going to be a new day tomorrow, and the new day might bring a very different perspective, and sleep helps to quell emotion. Because if you're just saying like, I'm reacting, like I can feel it in myself when I need to step away and I need to just sleep. Right. So whether it be sleep or spending time with loved ones or getting out and taking a walk, like do anything that you can to calm your nervous system, because we very rarely make good decisions when we are in heightened emotional states, both good and bad. Yeah. So I would say do what you need to get your nervous system under control. I was very lucky at Degreed. We had a team and we would all burn out. We would all get in the pit of despair. It never once happened that we were all in that at the same time. So when I was burnt out, I could call Dave, I could call Chris, I could call Eric, and they were in like a great state. And just hearing from them got me out of it, right? So I would say as you build out your founding team, as you compile teams, as you grow, like have it there so you can balance each other out, both in the capabilities you bring to the table, but also in your own psychology. A quote from Dave in a moment where like I was really feeling the pressure is he said 99% of the job is managing your own psychology. And that's where take a nap, go for a walk, call your mom or your dad or your right, like whoever it is in your life that can just get you to a good spot. Play with your dog, because I think the most of the time when we can get to a place of logic, not emotion, we're just going to make better decisions. The other thing that I would like, I would always do is I'd call a customer, because they would tell me why they loved it. And they had a very different view. Of course, there was always stuff that needed to be fixed, but I would call a customer and they would remind me what we were doing together, why it was worth it. Like, hey, there's still some really great companies that are paying you to do what you're doing. Have them remind you why. And there's that you can never call customers enough. And that always brightened my day. Even when they were mad at me, it helped me to remember what I was up to when I was talking to customers.
Kat, the mindset of a company at 0 or, $5 in revenue, trying to get to that first million is different than the company trying to go from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, which is different than getting to 20 or 25, which is drastically different than getting to 100. Yep. And as someone who basically got to go through in your career and see those different stages of the company, how did your mindset shift? Not just for yourself, but as far as the types of people you wanted to have around you? Meaning, like, I loved your point about making sure you're surrounding yourself with people who are believers, who really want to go where you're at and have that right entrepreneurial mindset. How do you know, like, what to look for in your employee base as you're growing and going through those different stages?
Yeah. Oh, I could spend hours on this portion. I think first, just to acknowledge 0 to 1 is so different than 1 to 5 and 5 to 10. And then if you can get to 10, you can get to anything. That's what I believe. You can get to 10 million, like, oof, boy, it's great. So 10 to 50 and then 50 to, on and on. Like that's really how my mind segments the different milestones in SaaS. So first is just like, you will be a different company at each of those milestones. Your mission's going to be the same. Hopefully, some people might say, but like it is a different organization and there are different operational cadences that need to happen at each of those steps. Like it's just going to feel vastly different. That's exciting because, hey, a lot of people have to change jobs. You could stay at the same company, which is what I did, and have vastly different experiences as you do it. 0 to 1, you need people who are really comfortable in ambiguity. And I talked to a founder day before yesterday where he called it, he loves to wander in the jungle. It feeds him of just like there's a million paths available and he's just foraging and he's finding a way to make something work. Like there's people that love the jungle. So from 0 to 1, it needs to be that. They are adventurers. They like to dig. They're going to find a way to make it work, right? That's who you need around you from 0 to 1. From 1 to 5, it's more about pattern recognition. Why is it working? What are we sniffing out here, right? Like those are people that you need to start to form hypothesis. See, is this product market fit? Like, is this repeatable? So you're looking for those who can identify patterns and still be very comfortable in ambiguity and not hold too firm to a pattern that they think they might have found. Like that's 1 to 5. 5 to 10, you start to bring in that lovely word of process because we got to repeat something, right? Ooh. And people who want process, like that's just so different. It's so different from those that love the jungle. We had a lot of people roll off the company from 5 to 10 because it didn't feel startup being fun anymore. That's totally fine because it starts to be not startup being fun anymore. You're starting to mature into a real business, right? You're getting ready for growth. And I would say growth stage from 10 million to 50, that feels like a company. That's a scale up. That's not a startup. It's processes. You're getting HR. It's repeatable. Like there's playbooks for the sales team. That's so different. You need people who are good at process. You need people who like it, who enjoy it, who will, do the meetings. But you always there's still going to be some ambiguity. It's not going to be perfect. So like there's just different profiles at each stage. And then from 50 million on, it feels a lot more like a standard business where things are predictable. At that point, a lot of people don't even appreciate equity because they're like, I'm here for the paycheck. And that's okay. It's totally okay for them to be there for the paycheck because the work actually mimics that. So I think just being aware of what happens to organizations as they mature and not being afraid of it. I think we could have operated more efficiently if we'd accepted those phases a little earlier and not tried to stay hip and cool. Because maturity happens for a reason, it's great to go through adolescence. It's great to grow into adulthood and to appreciate. I was talking to my husband this morning, like I really am loving middle age. Yeah. I love that I care so deeply about what that tree looks like outside, right? Like appreciate it. You don't have to mourn the days of your youth where you were going out and having fun. And the same is true for organizations. And I would say, give yourself the freedom if you're a founder or on that team to step away from stuff if you don't find it joyful anymore. Like it's okay if you're not a growth stage person or a late stage person. It's totally fine. If you're an early stage, you love the jungle, I think that awareness is a very important thing and it's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm just sadistic and I love to learn. So I stayed through, longer tenure than even the founders because I was just hungry and learning and it was different. And I loved that it was different. But I wasn't attached to the thing in the way that the founders were, the soul of it in the same way. So I think that's what allowed me to stay and watch it evolve is like, I wasn't a founder.
Jeez. Todd, I don't think we've ever heard anything like this before. Like,
by the way, Kat, that was like the best possible answer I could have ever heard. It was ever. One of the things that's wild, I don't think people really know this. Casey and I, from the notes we sent you beforehand, we don't try to really script these interviews. We just kind of let them go where they want to go. And I asked that question. I was like, I don't know where she's going to go with this. And I was like, that was the most bangerang awesome answer ever. I love that. So thank you. It was such a good insight into like, what's your mindset and where are you at personally and where's your company at? And are you you have the right fit and are you moving the right direction? I think I'm loved that. I'm going to clip that for my own highlight to listen back to as a good reminder.
I felt like Todd, I was on the therapy couch with her. Like
for
she
sure.
was walking.
That's what we want this thing to be. So
I feel like I owe her money for a therapy session off of that. Cause I'm like, that is me. That's the level I'm in. And my wife told me something funny. She's like, do you remember that book we bought before we had our first child, What to Expect When You're Expecting? Right? Everybody bought that book, right? And you read through, okay, you're now at 16 weeks and this is what you should be feeling. She's like, someone needs to write the book that
They
says
have.
17 years after you've expected what you were supposedly expecting. Like,
Mhm.
help me in these years. I
Yeah.
need that as Kat. Someone's written that book.
Yes, not with kids, but with startups.
Yeah,
Kids,
sorry,
I don't
Casey,
know.
you're
We're
on your
all
own
just
figuring
friends.
out your teenagers.
Yeah,
But Kat
teenagers,
has
it's just like
business
a
for-
good luck. Yeah, adults are tough. With startups, though, they have. And I found it way too late. It's the High Growth Handbook. It is a Bible in terms of just like, if stuff works, here's everything that's going to break and why you're okay. Like here's everything. Like High Growth Handbook is so good. I give it to all of my CEOs. Like it's awesome. All the CEOs I support. The other one is the Messy Middle, and it's for growth stage of just like, you are in this land of like, you're not a public company, you're not a startup, and everyone is way too busy to talk about what happens in this phase because they're just grinding.
Yeah.
And then we don't want to think about the trauma of what it felt like. But the Messy Middle, they wrote it down, and it's really, really great as well. So those are the two.
Todd, can I ask one more question for us and get some free therapy from Kat? Okay, Kat, I'm that jungle person. I love to go out in the jungle. I love to hunt. I love to go out and figure things out. And like you said, like when you were talking about, hey, if the paycheck doesn't come in, yeah, you want the paycheck, but I'm more determined to figure this thing out. Like that would be my biography, I feel, for me. You bring in process people. How do process people and people that love to go discover new things and they love that spirit, there's that point where you have to have both, right, to work to get to that next stage. What would be your advice to get those individuals to work better together? People that are in there to help build the process, and then people that are saying, hey, we're not there yet, we still need to think of this as a startup. How do you get those two to really see eye to eye? What would be some advice you'd give me on this?
First is going to sound really non-intuitive, but it was true repeatedly. People who have been at massive enterprise organizations and have seen and navigated a very political, very slow-moving, high process-oriented culture, they're actually great from 10 to 50. And we, before hiring them, were like, are they going to be able to adapt to startup life?
Right.
These people are so exhausted from the bureaucratic political machines that the enterprises are. They are patient. They've been through it. So like they are exhausted from bureaucracy and so ready to like meet your dysfunction, but it's a refreshing dysfunction to them. And dysfunction just meaning lack of process, not like executive dysfunction, right? It's they're patient. They can navigate things moving slow and being broken, but they're coming at it from a different way. So it's refreshing to them. And with each of those individuals, like they were way more patient. The ones that it didn't seem to work for were those where like it was a scale up where they had just made it work. And this process, this playbook, they were killing it. So like tech companies that are not super broken yet, maybe Google is broken now, but like those, they didn't work because they were still fun. They were still exciting. And they had this playbook that was working in like a still fun place. So I would say like really know who you're hiring and what they're going to be okay with, because then that collaboration can just happen.
That's awesome.
And as far as like, how do you make it work together? I'm a big believer. I have a playbook, like how to work with Kat. Here's who I am when I'm good. Here's who I am when I'm exhausted. When I'm mad at you, here's what I do. Here's how I communicate, right? Because that, whether it's, you know, someone who's highly process oriented or not, they just know what to expect from you. And they know how you behave, and they're not having to waste any cycles interpreting your behavior. To me, that psychology part is really the most important thing. And I like to dispel any of the mystery of my psychology with those who have to work with me. And I did that after years of making people cry working with me, because I come across so nice and friendly. But when I'm in business mode, I will hurt people. I'm just like, I am just candid and to the point. So they go from like, oh, she's so fun, she's so nice, to like, I made them cry. So I had to just be like, I am very fun and nice, but like, if you cross me, I'm going to yell at you. And I don't think you're a bad person. Right. So just putting that out for them. Then, I can boil it down to that principle of no surprises. Like, my behavior shouldn't surprise you, even when it's surprising. And I think that helps us all to work together too. And that then encouraged the individuals that worked around me to write their own, because then I knew, oh, here's how they kind of work. So personality tests, everything kind of feels woo-woo, but no, it actually matters, because at least at a high level, we can anticipate behavior. And I think for any functioning organization, that's the most important thing, is can we anticipate and know what to expect from someone? Because I really do think all of us are doing our best, and we're showing up and we're working hard. But when things, when we cross each other, it's like, they meant to do that to me. No, it's just vastly different working styles.
Gosh, that would be such a great interview question when you're looking for someone to say, I want you to write out when we're working well together, what does it look like? When you're struggling with me, what would it look like? And get that from them beforehand. So you cannot really understand what that looks like. And then the same vice versa. Oh gosh, that was so good, Kat.
There's one personality type that, like, try as we might, it does not work. It does not work between me and those. I know I'm going to really, like, I destroy those people, even when I think
there'll be a lot more tears than expected.
Yeah, way more. So I'm just like, hey, I'm going to point you over here, because you're going to work with them so much better than you would work with me. And it has nothing to do with you. It's just like that. It doesn't jive.
Oh my gosh, Todd, I'm going to change my life because of this conversation. I'm going to be a better person.
The thing that we always realize is that I think we haven't really been sure, Kat, which one of us is the therapist and which one of us is the patient. And when we've done this, and it's clear today, Casey's the patient. So we switch roles. We've talked a lot today about how we interpret internal signals with the companies we're working for. If the company I'm working for is going to succeed, if my teammate is rowing the same direction as me, or if we're going to butt heads. I want to get your take, because now that you work in the venture world and you're supporting startups and tech companies, how do you look for signals and indicators to determine if the companies outside that you're not stuck in the messy middle with all these people? How do you determine and help them figure out where they're at and if they're going to win? What do you use to try to evaluate others, rather than, since we've been focusing so much on like when you're in it, when you're living it, now as an outsider advising and supporting and identifying opportunities, how do you do that today?
I think the first thing that's always an indicator something's off is if transparency goes away. So, we as human beings tend to hide things that are uncomfortable, whether conscious or like we just do it, right? Like, we want to talk about the good things. We don't want to face the hard things. And so I always know, hey, something's up when we lose a level of candor, when there's not as much transparency as to the numbers, right? Like, the details that I'm getting from those CEOs are usually a click up. And I'm trying to click in. And if I can see, again, it's psychology. If I can see discomfort, my job is to help them face that discomfort and to wade through it, because we can avoid problems, but everything is always on fire. But if you're not at least tempering each fire, like, something's going to turn into a blaze. So I see my role as, offensive line. I'm mixing analogies here, but like, my job as a board member is like, I want to see that tackle coming at you before you get hit in the face, and try to preempt it and be like, they're coming, right? So maybe I'm the offensive coach. I don't know what we would call it, but I'm trying to help them see issues before they destroy them, and get really, really comfortable in things not working. I think a lot of times when we report out, to our teams, to our investors, to our families, we're adding a shiny glaze on that. It to make it seem like we're crushing it, but like, no one's ever crushing it. Like, listen to an earnings call. of some of the best organizations in the world. And what they have to do is own up to the things that aren't working. And they do it well, and they don't get emotional about it. They're just like, this is working, this is not working. Like, if you ever want to learn how to be good at talking candidly about a business, look at those, and it's SaaS, right? So we know the best performing cloud companies, listen to their earnings calls, listen to how they address things with those analysts. It's a really, really good just practice to go through to get better at it, and to see, you know, to get your reps in without having to do it personally. And then back to the question around like, how do I help? How do I see things? Like, operating in trust with the CEOs I support is like my number one goal, so that they can tell me the hard things. And we can see, like, is that catastrophic? Is that going to be, you know, hey, we've cut off our hands, or we've cut off our heads? Because if we cut off our heads, we're done. If we cut off our hands, hey, we got other hands, hopefully, and then we can use our elbows if need be, right? There's not a lot of things that can kill a business catastrophically, but there are some. But if we don't know about them until it's septic, then we're done. And so just getting to trust and candor, like that's job number one. And I think that's inside of teams too. So if I'm in an organization and I'm thinking about, is this the one? Is this a rocket ship? Do I know the numbers? Do I know what our targets are? Like, do I know what our quarterly goal is for revenue, for, you know, retention? Did we hit it? Did we not? So QBRs internally are a really good thing to do, just to get in that motion of candor and accountability. Like, here's our number, everyone aligned to it. Did we hit it? Did we miss it? Why? If you feel like you're in product and you don't know what revenue is, like, that's terrifying. Why don't you know what the revenue number is? Like, that was, you know, it seems really simplistic and basic, but I think it's just, the fundamentals are where we're going to see, is it working or not? I think in 21, there were a lot of pipe dreams on like, this business model is new and innovative. And it's like, is it a business? Do we know if the fundamentals are working? Do we have negative margins? It's not a good business, maybe, you know, like just the basics. And depending on, you know, your capability and skill, like, you might not think you have financial acumen. Like, no, it's pretty easy to have the level of financial acumen we need in SaaS. Like, do we have revenue? Are we retaining it? Because if you do have those two things in SaaS, like, you're going to get great things are going to happen. I love SaaS because it compounds. So anyway, those are the two most important metrics if you're in SaaS.
Todd, I'm going to try to sneak in one last question, because 42 minutes have flown by already, or 40 minutes is just, I can't believe how quick this conversation has gone. Kat, a lot of executive team members, when they're in that startup mode, they shoot for some pretty aggressive goals, and sometimes, like, you know, shoot way over the top on those goals. So you're never hitting those goals. So how do you evaluate that if your leadership team is setting goals that everyone at the organization really feels like, I mean, there's no way we're getting there? Am I looking at the transparency of the honesty of what's working well and what's not working well, and I'm making kind of a decision of about my company off of that? Because I do know those goals are like beyond audacious. Like, how do you reconcile that when sometimes ownership or leadership puts really, really, really aggressive goals? I mean, we all love aggressive goals in the startup, like that. It is what it is, but sometimes it gets really out there. So that can depress some people in thinking, gosh, we're never hitting our numbers. Like, what would be some advice you'd have for those people that are saying, I see the goals, we're not hitting our goals, but I still see good signs, and I am seeing some negative signs, but I think the good signs are outweighing the bad. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I would say, if your operating plan assumes insane performance on the revenue side and you're never hitting your numbers, that's a problem. That's catastrophic. If you're burning so much that, like, you require that much top line to survive, that's a problem, right? So if you see we're not hitting the numbers and we're still hiring people like crazy and we're getting served lunch every day, like, you're burning too much and you're not hitting your goals, right? But hopefully in the boardroom, what's happening is, like, you've got a budget, you've got an operating plan, and then you've got your stretch goals. And you're always going to say your stretch goals, but that's not the board plan. Like, what's the board level plan that the board is expecting you to hit to keep operating? And then what are our stretch goals that we're telling the company, knowing it's not likely, right? And if that isn't the case, if it's just like everything is hope and imaginary and we're burning to match that, like that's a problem. But I also think it reveals itself pretty quickly too. And it's, again, transparency kind of reveals the financial acumen. How does leadership talk about the numbers? Like, do they know the burn? Do they know the upside and why? Or is it just like, we need to grow 50% this year, top line, go. Like, that can get a little scary, but sometimes it works. So there, sadly, as is usually the case, there's no hard and fast rules. Yep. But I have seen a pattern of where leadership has good financial acumen and they know how the numbers interact with each other and what your burn has to be and where you'll need to cut if you aren't hitting the numbers. Like, they know those things and they can talk about them with no emotion and where they'll need to make the adjustments, right? That level of candor is going to tell you a lot. If there isn't, if it's just like guns blazing, we're focused on top line, like come hell or high water, like I might click in a little bit. Might just be an eccentric CEO and you got a great CFO, but like it's worth checking.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kat, as Casey mentioned, this has flown by way too fast. You've been an awesome interviewee who's given us an amazing list of ideas. I think that hopefully our listeners will come away with having some actionable homework, if you will, of how they can operate. In fact, the last thing we always like to ask people when they come on is, if you could give one homework assignment to our listeners, somebody who's working at any stage startup, what would you ask them to do? What should people do after this therapy session? Because they're probably have a lot of people having some feelings. So then what type of homework would you give our listeners after this conversation today?
Be curious in your feelings. A lot of the worst mistakes that I made was I sat in my feels and I made assumptions as to how other people were feeling. So like if you find yourself in the feels, a really good thing to do is go cross department and check them. Like, hey, this is what I see. What do you see? Like, how do we help each other? Because, organizations can get siloed even when they're very collaborative. And usually that's where like the most traumatic things are happening, is when you're like, I'm alone, I'm isolated, I have an enemy over here. Like if you find yourself in that moment, like just go talk to somebody and ask the hard questions and have the hard conversations with each other. And like, you're going to have a great ally after that. Like that would be my advice, is like always be the person that steps out of emotion and challenges your own assumptions by talking to someone else. I'm a big believer that like none of us have truth. None of us see everything that's going on, that the only way to get to truth is to get different perspectives. And so the more perspectives you can get, the closer to a picture of reality you'll have. And so I would say, like, if you find yourself in a moment of stress, like just go get a different perspective on it, because it's very low likelihood that someone in another part of the organization is going to share the exact same perspective. They might be sniffing out the same problem, but they're going to see it in a different way. And even in that challenge of perspective, I think there comes some hope and something tangible that you can go do. I think where things get the darkest is you think, I can't make any change. I see a problem and there's no change I can make. As long as we can enact a change, there's hope and there's movement, right? So talking to other orgs usually shows you a way you can help to make an adjustment and to push things forward. So that would be my advice, is like always talk to someone in another part of the organization if you're feeling kind of low.
I love that. So that's good advice for me. I'm going to stick with the water analogy. No person should be an island unto themselves, right? So get off your island and go talk to other people. So,
even if it has to be wading through the cold waters of sin.
Even if it's wading through the cold water. Kat, thank you so much. This has been phenomenal. We've loved having you. And thanks to all of our listeners who join us each week, and everybody go work on saving those business relationships. Thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you, guys. It was great to be here.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.